Hello and welcome to the Black Soldier Fly Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, David Tavernor, and in this series we dig beneath the surface to uncover what's really happening inside the Black Soldier Fly industry. Hello from the Black Soldier Fly Leaders Podcast. I would like to introduce you to my next guest, or today's guest on my podcast. A very playful personality, but someone who has been in the industry for a long time, has been servicing the industry with some really interesting, creative and innovative technology. It's none other than Bob Holtermans, aka the Flying Dutchman. Bob, how are you doing?
Yeah, thank you. So far, so good, I always say. The day hasn't finished yet, so a lot of things can still go wrong, but again, doing well. So thank you.
Good. Always good to have a realistic outlook on life. So tell me, Bob, what has been your experience coming into the industry and how have you got into Black Soldier Flies in the first place?
Oh, it's definitely an experience in itself. It started in I think end of 2016. Again, my background comes actually from mushroom farming. I'm an entrepreneur now for over 20 years. And let's say that's still an active company. So that company always has a focus on supplying equipment for the mushroom industry. And then end of 2016, we got in contact with a company called Synergy in Kenya, and they said, okay, we saw YouTube videos, perhaps you can do something with insect farming. Again, that was completely new for us. I had no idea about even the existence of insect farming, but I always said, okay, what do I care if I sell something to a mushroom farmer or insect farmer? So let's go with it. I think also that's the start from this industry for us. But then the first 3 years, I think we only had to focus on them, just making a pilot and ending up with a commercial farm. And then looking more into the market, I saw, I was always surprised. I saw a lot of companies active in the industry. I leave a lot of websites, let's say, active in this industry. But always when you clicked a few pages further, there was nothing really yet at. So people were interested in this industry, but not had done more than a drawing, let's say like that. But I just had pictures and the movie. I could show something. So that's where it started from us. And in the end, I think in 2019, I then set up Insect Engineers, and that's a bit where we are today. That's why we have starting point. So sometimes people ask, how did it start? Simply, it started with the email. That's the real true answer. I mean, I received an email from somebody from the insect industry, and I actively replied on it, and that's the real starting point.
So what was going through your mind when you saw that email come into your inbox and you were like, hang on, this isn't mushrooms. What's this got to do with mushrooms, right?
Well, it's I'd say it tickles your brain in a way of I always like, how to say, thinking along with the customer, trying to create a solution which works for them. And it was already from that existing industry, but so no particular feeling, good or bad, about this industry. It's mainly interest, and mainly I like sitting with a customer and saying, okay, this is what we're facing, this is what we're looking for, how can you help, what do you think? And no, it actually gave a lot of positive energy, and no matter, of course, the market has its ups and downs, but the positive energy always stayed. That never went away.
Synergy's point of view, who sent that initial email, why did they reach out to a mushroom farmer? Are there similarities between mushroom farming and insect farming, or black soldier flies to be specific?
At that moment, at least not. But I always say they came up with the idea to look if mushroom technology can be used in insect farming. And so in the end, when we say about that, of course, we have, let's say, you have the breeding, let's say production and processing. So in this case, we're talking about production, not breeding, not processing. And they didn't want to grow on crates. They had like the small boxes, and they saw more benefit in if you can do it on a larger scale, on a larger surface. And that's in the end what mushroom farming does. And of course, we started with some standard, partly customized technology which made for them. Has had a lot of changes since then, because you cannot grow mushrooms in the insect farm the other way around. You cannot grow insects in a mushroom farm. But the basis of having that longer surface, a certain way how climate goes, or airflow and so on, is of course also in insect farming very important. On one hand, the practicality and simplicity not on a negative way, not on that is that simple, but yes, in basic it is it is simple, and that's, I think, a key part, because in the end, of course, with all of today's knowledge, we know cost price is key. Technology partly contributes to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the industry is overcomplicated at the moment. It is early stages, so we're still trying to find out what is the best way to produce these tiny guys. But it does need simplicity, in my view, a bit like how agriculture, in all other sectors within agriculture, operates fairly simply, to be honest. If you look at an overcomplicated system that has struggled in the past 10 years of vertical farming, that's the challenge that we've got. So tell me a bit about your system through your voice, but I guess you could probably, where else can you see it if you wanted to actually understand more?
At the end, the most practical is okay. I can see it. We also have an intake school, so that's can be based in Netherlands. So let's say 10 minutes from our office, we have let's call it the R&D center. That's like a pilot farm, where we visually can show different things. Of course, we have different customers around the world, so people normally also welcome there. But the main difference is there that, again, the industry grows on crates or trays, I'm going to call it, and if they are 60 by 40 centimeter or 1 meter by 1 meter, okay, there are variations, but at some point it stops at a certain size. And I always seen that as a more logistic warehouse solution. And I think we are farming because we are creating a climatized room. We have to deal with heat, with humidity, CO2, ammonia, all things which are in general no good for moving parts. So in the end, we call it a brand, we call it the Zoom system. What in the end, the reality is, it's an aluminum rack. It's like in a commercial farm, it's like 1.5 meter wide and 30 meter long. 7 levels. You can have 7 levels, can have 9 levels. That's a bit variable. Often 2 rows of that in one room. And the advantage is there's no moving parts in the room. So at some point, we bring a machine towards these racks, and with the machine, you can fill the substrate layer and the larva. For example, after 2 hours, you filled 50 tons of substrate. Your room is full. You close the door. The machinery moves away, and of course, your climate kicks in.
So it's just stainless steel, I assume, racks.
Yeah, aluminum. There's a special
Aluminum.
The stainless steel could be possible but I think that would make it more expensive. But it's still a special. It needs a special cooling, heat, and treatment of aluminum, which is resistant then also to aggressive things like ammonia. Because of course you don't want to build your farm today and then in 1 year your farm is already down.
No, we can't have any more news stories like that, Bob, in the industry.
Well, I would go. Yeah, well, I don't think that, say, the 2025 was a good year for positive stories. I think you got a lot of bad stories. A lot of Indian farms which started with a lot of cash in the end to have troubles. And I think for the beginning of 2026 it will be the same. At the same time, that motivates me, for example, in making sure, okay, let's make sure we build up the right reference and example farms to showcase that this is a commercial business. And important that you don't, from day one, that you're honest to yourself, but also honest to your investors. And I'm not saying that people are lying, but I'm saying it because you can sometimes twist a bit data or postpone a certain discussion. But I think it's better to have the discussion on day one. And once you're up and running, and then like, yeah, why did you make this decision? Yeah, it was easier to get money. Yeah, okay. But in the end, I think people are happier when you have a successful farm than 2 years later you have to conclude, okay, it's not going to be a success.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come on to why we're going through a difficult time in the industry at the moment in a bit, but I want to focus more on exactly what you're doing, what you've alluded to. So, how is it that you are producing a better system, or what is it that's a better system for you, or can you give a breakdown of what it is?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, again, in the end, it's there's less logistics, so less movement of crates, of movement of people, equipment. Doesn't matter how far it's automated. In the end, there's always a lot of movements on the farm. So on one hand, again,
it's labor costs or kind of
it's also labor costs, but
that you're
again,
avoiding.
people that sometimes tackle it and think, no, but it's fully automated. But then I've seen sometimes how many maintenance people have on a farm, and I'm shocked. Only 1 out of 10 customers would ask, what's the maintenance cost? But I think 9 out of 10 should ask that question because it's a critical point also in the operational cost. But okay, that's a learning curve for the industry. So on hand, we do have lower maintenance costs. At the same time, it's a practical approach. So when we fill a room, 50 tons of substrate within 2 hours. There's a proper airflow. The climate is critical. And I've seen always people, how to say, everything goes, okay, I have this room and I can stuff this much in one room. And then suddenly it doesn't work anymore. We know that you need space in the room, space between the layers to get a proper airflow, to get your heat out, or have to get your ammonia out. So, we do have a proper, let's say, climate system. And later on, it was not initially, but later on, of course, we learned more about black soldier fly farming. And there we realized that it even proved it's more farming because we have more flexibility in the system. But we can also multiple feed, so we can add feed during the production. We can also mix the substrate during production. We can also add water during production. I'm not saying that you always need these things, these three things, but what you a farmer in the end looks for flexibility. Sometimes condition change, etc. I always say a farmer walks in the room and thinks, it's not what I expected it for today. Okay, where can I make changes? In this case, in our system, you can mill, you can have some changes during the production, so you can still have certain corrections. And I think that's in the end a critical part, definitely for large scale farming.
Okay, so in terms of the multiple feedings and also the mixing of feed, you've obviously got this engineered into your system, whereas a more conventional vertical farms or crates approach, you can't do that without massive cost, because you've essentially got to add it back into the feeding station and etc. What impact does that make? Does it improve yield? Does it stop it from going out of control? Does it reduce days to harvest? Have you seen instances where you've actually changed the nutrition based on the age of the larvae? To use an example, in the broiler industry, you start off on a chick pellet, a chick crumb, which is high in protein, and then a finisher pellet, which is a bit lower in protein, lower cost, fattening up the chickens more than anything. Tell me about those, please.
Yeah, actually,
Questions there.
Actually, all of that in the way of, because it's the advantage of the industry, but directly also disadvantage of the industry is that we can use all these different kinds of raw materials, which is great because it creates a widespread of opportunity. The disadvantage when you're beginning industry is that it's hard in comparison data. When I have 5 customers, 5 different substrates, so you can compare, of course, how your technology is running, etc. But you cannot really compare the results of the farm because, again, the substrate is very decisive in what's the output of it. But at the same time, again, we've seen with, for example, multiple feed that often at some point the top layer starts drying out. But by adding at some point a new layer on top of it, then it's you make it more wet again, so it becomes more digestible for the larva, which in the end results in a better conversion. At some point, you can also say sometimes some growers like it better to have, for example, they aim for 10 centimeter, but they start with 5 centimeter, because then they say that the digestion is better and quick in the beginning, and later on we can add another layer.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because I guess if it's 5 centimeters to start with, then you've got that it's oxygenating the feedstock easier rather than 10 layers, which is creating pockets of anaerobic.
But it's also, of course, also in that regard, it's again, a lot of things depend on your raw materials, but the same with how does the substrate act in the end is also, how much larva do you put in per square meter? There's also a lot of variation, but also what's your structure. So sometimes we also say perhaps, and in the feed, perhaps you have you focus on 90% should be good nutrition feed for your larva, but perhaps the 10% should be more for structure to create a better airflow within the substrates, which also gives a better digestion for the larva. And again, we also have a customer who in the end made the choice to simply make a cycle shorter. Instead of, for example, doing it in 9 days, they do it in 5.5 days. But they, with a smaller volume of substrate, for example, with 5 centimeter, and that's the fit. But that worked best, for example, for their case. So it's in that case, on that side, not one size fits all. But the same, we also had experience with often when you, for example, have a 9-day cycle at, after day 5 or day 6, you get a peak of ammonia. But when I multiple feed on day 5, the peak of ammonia is not there. So also there, it's and you can, of course, you can ask yourself the question, what's the cause of it? Probably has to do with a new feed, because it can do with new feed, so there's enough to eat because with water content. So there's different things which can have effect on that. So again, there are multiple reasons, but I keep telling customers like, okay, if you buy equipment from insect engineers, then it's you get this. This is always included because the machine can always do this. You want them a multi-feed or not, the option is always there because it's attached to the machine. But I will not state to a customer they always need to multi-feed because I know the flexibility counts. And with the immaturity of the industry, you don't know yet what's the standard. So I see my role as one equipment supplier also to create the flexibility, but I cannot 100% judge what works best or what is best in what situation, because I know there are variations.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. We need to be really open as to what the standard is at the moment, because as we've alluded to, there are failures in the industry, and so we need to challenge the standard. Currently, the standard, in my view, is that the ideal environment for black soldier fly larvae is 70% moisture level, there or thereabouts, of the substrate, and 28 to 30 degrees centigrade for the rearing temperature. That's widely accepted, I would say. And then obviously you add in this moisture, and what you finish with is hopefully a dried out product that can be separated, the larvae and frass. But then if you're doing
not to comment, but in the way of what somebody said, okay, we can also add water. And 2 years ago, would say, are you stupid? Are you mad? Why would you add water? Because my sieving causes even a bigger headache. But also there's a choice about, of course, the end of the cycle, you want to have the moisture content lower with only the main reason for sieving. But then you can also ask your question, is that best for the larva? And sure, again, larva like it's wet, my sieve likes it dry, so that's a contradiction. I still like the challenge than saying, no, how can I, in my view, the focus should be, how can I create the best possible growing conditions? And in my view, as a technology supplier, I should try to fix the sieving, not with a more wet product. In the end, that's, of course, you can balance everything out to see what best cost price, but it's, you can also look if I need to grow 24 hours longer to dry out the substrate, perhaps what happened to now.
This is what I was coming on to, because I with my own production, I've had where I've maybe got the feed mixes wrong, and I've had too much water in the feed, then I experience quite a lot of crawl out, which kind of just ruins your whole batch. We all hate crawl out. And so if you have too much, or if you want to try and absolutely avoid getting to that too much water, can you start off with a lower than the I say in inverted commas lower water content at the start? Start with say 60% or 50%, I don't know, but then you can keep adding so that the larvae still have that moisture to get to. Because is the standard we need 70% moisture because that will satisfy them for their entire growing period, or can we start with 50% and maintain it at 50%? For example, until the day when you need to dry them out, and then you just leave them for 2 days without adding any extra water. What are your findings on that?
No, that's actually true indeed. It gives new flexibility, and it's, of course, when I use certain ways, perhaps then I already have a very, let's say, liquidish substrate, so I cannot avoid that. So they try to get it more dry. But for us, it was. I remember when we started, I think the first filling we ever did was like pure household waste, and it was like I think the plastic bottles were even still in there, let's say. So it was later on, by time and by new customers, it started with, okay, people are blending, grinding their feed better to get a small particle size. At some point, it became more liquid, and at some point our equipment was used on, can be, let's say, high moist content, but we were not suitable to do it liquidly because it would go everywhere except the direction we want to go. Later on, then we made a solution also with the same setup that we can also have a machine where I can liquid feed, so I can pump it in our zoom racks. But while finishing that work, then we saw the industry again. And when I talk industry, it sounds very big, but again, we know it's not a very big industry yet. But then you saw a change in industry again, where I need people will say, oh, wait a moment, if we have the option to, then we rather start a bit drier, get everything in, and then later on start adding moist content. That's that's happening. But again, it's not always. I can also examples where people start with a very liquid pumpable substrate, so that is not a thing. But I've also seen that we talk about moist content, but it's sometimes when I see something very liquid, I automatically assume it has a high moist content. But I also learned that we saw that one customer thought, massive high moist content, really liquid and so on, because we can pump it and so on. But then it was, after one day, it starts drying out. So, but it was, because it was grinded that well, that's why it was that liquid, that pumpable. But in the end, the moist content was not that high. And then you need to be able to add water afterwards.
I guess you look at a carrot and you think, wow, that's solid. That's not got much water in. It's got sort of 91% water or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's similar, I suppose. So moving on to the climate now, and what you found out in the climate, because this is why I love you, Bob, is that you're challenging everything in the industry, challenging the norms and trying to find out what is the best way to do these things. It's kind of true engineering innovation, right? With the climate, you were talking about the conventional setup of insect farms having climate problems because you've got to get the consistent air to and from each box upon multiple layers. So what I've seen from your system, because I've visited Sanergy in Kent, you've still got your Zoom racks layered on top of each other, right? And you've got them side by side in a room, which is, it is vertical farming still, and it's side by side. It's packed in, and like you said, these insects create a lot of gases. How do you manage that, and what is the difference there?
It starts with, perhaps for explanation, it starts with perhaps a common mistake by the startups is, okay, people, figuratively speaking, start with 50 crates and that works well. And they had a certain room, and suddenly think, I can also put 500 crates in this room, and they do, and then suddenly it doesn't work anymore. And they wonder, how is this possible? Again, the main reason is, one hand, again, free space, airflow. Air needs to be able to move, and even needs to, in the end, around your system, but also through your system. So again, what we've done is, for mushroom farming, we know very well how air moves in a room. So to make sure that there's enough air on each layer. And as an industry, everybody, again, when I talk about pitching or to invest on day one or after 2 years, on day one, we say, no, we can fit, for example, 20 crates in this room, we stack it on top of each other. And when you visit the farm 2 years later, it's not 20, but suddenly became 12. And the reason is because they needed space in between to create a proper airflow. So I think that airflow is critical to maintain. And again, you can have very basic climate, and you can have very advanced climate. Again, can control the cooling, the heating. I can also decide not to do that, but that's a bit of cost price approach. So although I like technology, I like to, of course, to deliver it as complete as possible. In some cases, it can be cost price wise better to not do. In the end of, we normally use the phrase, you can score 10 out of 10 for €10. But sometimes it's better to score a 9 out of 10 for €5 because that's where you make money. That's the same with climate. So we're not, yes, climate control means I can really control what's going on in the room. But sometimes you cannot do without climate control. You always need airflow. That's, for example, what I also learned from, in this case, from one of the owners from Sanergy, from Annie. I remember very well, we were in a talk with another potential customer, and the customer was saying, no, but we can use our local climate, etc. And then he interfered, said, no. He said, no matter what you're doing, in all cases, even if you're not cooling and heating, you need proper airflow. So you need that heat and that perhaps ammonia that is generated in your room, you need to get it out of your room. So you need that air moving over each layers. And it's not that, again, if I look at a crate system, in the end, you can also manage to get a proper airflow on a crate system. But also the question is there, then often is, people calculate it with enormous piles of crates, but in reality, that's not a reality. And it's also often starts with a big ductwork and then in the end goes to smaller pipes where you can blow in between those layers. So technically that's possible, but it's very inefficient in the way it's expensive and inefficient because you go from energy-wise from something big to something small, which could create the energy loss. And the same is when we looked at climate in a room. The most perfect climate that you can create is by having an aerated wall. Aerated wall means on one side I blow air, on the other side I suck air. It gives a very precise flow. But again, it's perhaps 4 times more the price than what we currently do. We currently have simply a plastic air ducts. And again, also the whole pattern still of those plastic air ducts is critical. It's very important. But again, it keeps a plastic air duct. So in investment-wise, it's nothing shocking. And again, perhaps then I I only perform, for example, 3% less. But yeah, if then my price is only 25%, then that's the direction you go. And again, that's perhaps sometimes also what as an industry, when the industry begins, everybody tries to score the maximum score. But sometimes, again, like I said, sometimes it's better to score the 9 and because scoring a 10 out of 10 is simply way too costly and you will not have a business.
Yes, it's the Pareto principle of 80-20, right? What was I going to ask then? So, and from what I understand, your systems they're in polytunnels, but they're not polytunnels growing strawberries, right? They're closed, maybe double insulated thick, they're dark. So they are insulated and probably quite well, right? What's the benefit of using those structures above your racks?
Yeah, it's again in the end, just to clarity, you have in general two options. One end is the border structures you mentioned. The other one is simply sandwich panels. Then we'll directly come to advantage because the sandwich panel I need to build inside existing warehouse. That's sandwich panel is very nice. Also the look of it, etc. That's perfectly fine. The advantage of these round shaped buildings is it still has a very high insulation. It has an outer cover, inner cover, and I think 3 insulation layers in between. So it can stand in any climate in the world. But the advantage is I don't need that surrounding warehouse. So investment wise, I just need to, okay, you get an engineering drawing, you pour the concrete, and from there you build the building. And I think you can build normally 2 commercial buildings with 2 people within 1 week or something like that. So it's also quite straightforward. Of course, the first building always takes longer because people suddenly need to learn, but then it's copy paste. So again, the main advantage is you have a well insulated room, but actually for a very nice cost price because again you can directly build outside. Yeah, perhaps a side note then on the why sometimes it's still a choice. And a downside is for example in Netherlands I'm not allowed to build them. Yeah, because I will not get a permit because the law sees them as a non-permanent building. And it's like when you organize a party with a tent, let's say, then it's not so they see it as a party, let's say.
Insect party.
Yeah, so again, other hand with when you have a warehouse and when you build sandwich panels and you build them inside the room, so you don't need a building permit for that because you're making changes inside the building, not outside. Of course, when you use these round shaped buildings, you always need some countries perhaps not, but normally you always need a permit to build these. But again, the main reason is high insulation and economically feasible. Again, it's price wise attractive to build.
It's a good job that you're selling it in everywhere but the Netherlands then, I suppose. Well, even the Netherlands.
Yeah,
But
that's not even on my school. I'm not allowed to build them because I don't get a permit for it. So that's
you probably don't remember, but this was when I knew nothing about the industry. I still don't know that much about the industry, to be honest. But I came to insect school. It was part of the NGN nutrition course.
Yeah.
This was in 2022, so 3 years ago now. And I think they're in like quite a low building, aren't they? Your production sites. Okay, so to round off the system, insect engineers system, we've spoken about the kind of the life cycle. Once the insects are in there, how do you get everything in and how do you get it out? What's behind that?
In the end, it's like I said, when you look at the zoom rack itself, then it's simply it's aluminium framework. There's nothing there. What we use a kind of we call it a flexible floor. It's like a net cover which we can pull in and pull out. So there's not sometimes people misunderstand this thing is a conveyor belt. No, then okay, keep the conveyor belt in mind, but then the conveyor belt normally has no end. It goes around and around. No, this really has a start and end. So I take the start and I pull it in, and that's it. And when I want to
It's
pull
like
it
a
out,
sheet, is it?
yeah, like a sheet, and then that's you put it in, put it down. So in the end, you bring a machine towards the room in front of the zoom rack. That machine has a conveyor belt in it. So you supply the raw materials in the machine. And when you have a premium version, you can also do the 5D-old larva in the machine. And then it becomes one layer. And then from the conveyor belt of the zoom filler, then it goes on the flexible floor in the zoom rack. And then, for example, and it's 30 meters long. So again, we can have speeds from often we advise to start at 8 meters per minute, but if people want to do 20 meters per minute, also okay. Normally that's not practical with substrate supply, but again, theory that's possible. So you drag it in. You do, for example, 14 layers. When they all filled up, the machine moves away, you close the door. Then, for example, after 8-9 days, you open up again. But then that cover, and you can connect them to a bar, and that winds up. But by winding up again, all the feed and lava come. That's then dropped on a conveyor, and that can go on a pilot. It directly goes to the sieve. On a commercial farm, you go to a transport vehicle and then drives to the processing area. But again, also that emptying goes very fast. That commercial room which is filled with 50 tons of substrate, emptying can be done within 45 minutes because the harvest is really fast. Because it's, again, there's no sometimes the comparison is with investors like to see that robotic arm picking up a crate and doing this, let's say, because it looks automated. If it is automated, but again, looks like the future and things. But they say no, again, by connecting it and then it goes with 12 meters per minute. Yeah, again, in 45 minutes, the whole room is empty, and that's also in the end the efficiency and the practicality we want to showcase from. Sometimes we say from a farmer's approach. It's not that's not automation, but it's a bit from a different mindset. It's still looking at, we are very fond of technology, but at the same time, we are aware that it has to be idiot proof. And we also learn
So
it's
you
never
can,
100% idiot proof, but that's a different story.
yeah, I'm sure I could break it. As in, I'm the idiot. So you're essentially handling bulk material, aren't you? Whether it's the input or it's the output, which is useful because if we were to make the comparison with agriculture, agriculture handles bulk material. You go into a grain store and you've got hundreds of tons, thousands of tons of grains, or you talk in dairy farm, it's tens of thousands of liters of product. And so if we want this industry to be a success, we need to talk on those sort of levels. Now, you've spoken about cost, and your system is a lot lower cost, operations and capex. Can you share any details around that, please?
Yes, that is the reality. Is that it's not that when we started, we had to focus on being in capex wise, let's say, cheaper than other system. But in the end, of course, it makes life easier when you're on sales. That it's then you don't have to explain why you're more expensive. But again, it's in the end, it's when you operate like a Zoom filler. We always say there are 3 people involved in filling. That's I would always say 1 with brains and 2 with heads. So it's for that regard fairly idiot proof. Again, cost-wise, I was recently there was a conference in China, and they calculate everything per ton of substrate. I said, yeah, I understand. It gives it more practicality, but at the same time, difficulty because what's your density? What's the weight of your feet? 500 kilogram per cubic meter or 800? That can already give a lot of variations. I do think that in the end, when you look at a total turnkey project, we seem to be significantly cheaper, but again, never had that goal. Sometimes I'm there to say, although not everybody will agree with me, sometimes we made calculations and said, okay, even if this project would be 1 million euro more, it doesn't make a big effect on return on investment because in the end it comes back on operational cost. I think that's key. I keep telling people, keep in mind your operational cost, which also includes, for example, your fee, because that comes back day in, day out. And I think by having this more practical approach, more realistic approach, and looking at maintenance, looking at the practicality, but also simply looking at 8-hour working day, not always a 24-hour working day. I think that approach makes a difference. I can't really say again, because then the question is, what do you cost, what somebody else costs? But again, it's not that I have the price list of everybody in the industry and I can make a one-on-one comparison. But at the same time, yeah, we have seen and we have the confirmation that investment-wise and operational-wise, the direction we've chosen from end of 2016 to now, so let's say in almost 10 years' time, there was never a moment where we thought, perhaps we went the wrong direction, we have to change. Still, as a company my size, we're very flexible, we can quickly change, but in the direction we chose for at the Zoom restaurant, no, this always seems, also with other innovations in the market, which you saw with then I saw something, some drawer system, for example, and then people said, oh, that was fantastic. But what was fantastic? Yeah, they could add feed during production. And then I thought, oh, that's great, because I can do that not just in 3 meter, we can do it on 30 meter or 100 meters. So often where people perhaps saw a challenge of some new technology coming on the market, we've always seen apparently the let's say the improvements points those technology made, we always saw it back in our system again. So it only confirmed to us what we're doing. Again, price wise, yeah. What do you want me to say? I can say something costs 3 million euro, I can say something costs 10 million euro, but it's, there's a lot of variables where you want to choose from.
Yeah, I guess the comparisons you'd make with the conventional vertical farming crate model is the structure, whether it's a big warehouse or it's a polytunnel. Well, the concrete is the same, really, I suppose. You've got the robots versus your machinery,
Yeah.
or the robots and the forklifts. You've got the climate control systems, and then what you were explaining with your climate control, and obviously all of the crates versus your racks. The one that screams out to me is the structure differences. The polytunnel is going to be vastly cheaper than a warehouse. But then in terms of the machinery, you've obviously got very bespoke machinery like they have. Is there much difference there?
Yeah, it's in the end, there's a certain modularity, and that's also key. I think it's in the beginning. I think people saw us as that's nice equipment for small scale farm. No, it's other way around. It's like because one machine can do one room, but one machine can also do 30 rooms. So at some point when you're there, there's a modularity. At some point, you don't need to reinvest machinery because they can perfectly go along with the growth of your company. And again, I'm still keeping in mind 8-hour working day. So of course I can there again, when you want to pitch to an investor and say, okay, this machine can do 72 rooms, yes, that is correct. But I don't think you should. I would say, okay, no, when we exceed, for example, 30 rooms, then we should buy an extra set of machinery because we can keep an 8-hour working day, etc. But it's okay. That's just how you want to approach it. But I think the modularity is key, and it's again the type of staff you need. At some point, I always say you need a person to clean. So when we look at a working day, okay, 3 people start filling the room. After 2 hours, they're finished. Then I say 1 person starts cleaning the machine, 1 person goes harvesting, so starts emptying the room, and 1 person goes to the sieving area. After 1 hour, that person of harvesting is also finished. That guy was cleaning can also start cleaning that machine, and the guy who's doing the harvesting can perhaps help at sieving or at the processing or goes check breeding rooms, whatever his skills are. But there's always something to do. So it's you can try very hard in ruling out a person, but again, they have them for 8 hours, and again, tasks like cleaning and so on already there, no matter what type of farm you have. So that's how we look at things, and I think that makes a bit different mindset.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much for going through your system. I want to zoom, excuse the pun, out of the industry of this conversation and looking more at the industry. You are known in the industry as a Flying Dutchman. You've been many places. You've sold in many different countries. What's the industry looking like?
It's a very diverse industry. Well, first of all, again, if you look at customers, there's a customer in Chile, in US, and in UK, in Spain, and then Turkey, and in Abu Dhabi. It shows it's in the end a worldwide market. For a supplier, that's nice, but also difficult because it's who is your customer, and it can be very wide. So it can be a feed company, can be a fish company, can be a supermarket, can be waste company, and that is different options you have. It makes it attractive, but also difficult. When we look at the industry, it has its ups and downs. Again, I think when we started, I remember very well that my company manager said, "How can you sell a farm?" I said, "How can you sell this pilot farm? You have no idea about a return of investment." I said, "Does the customer so know?" I said, "I know. I also don't know the return of investment, but I said a certain potential industry, and you need to start somewhere." And then we saw different projects, and it was like, it seems to be a good industry. So step by step we made, but the industry is like a project, so it goes up, down, up, down. And it's at the same time when people, I think, at this stage want to survive in this industry, also in the things we do, my honest answer from the beginning is you need other business next to it. I can leave our mushroom business next to it. So the projects we sell are great, let's say, and it brings us a lot of joy, etc. But I have a workshop, and I can be, for example, now we're very busy with a project in the US, but for example, that we will commission it in April. So perhaps in May and June, there's no real work on the insect farm side, which directly doesn't hurt me because you have other bits going on, so you try to make your schedule there. But I think that's an important remark. And again, when you look at other suppliers in the industry, which are known also as turnkey suppliers, you will also see that they also have other business. And at the same time, now you see that the companies who focused purely on this industry, and that's their main business. I've seen software companies, I've seen companies develop it with breeding technologies and so on, that they're all not there anymore. And partly it's sensible because the market didn't grow that fast yet. So that's and again, you need a growing market for everybody to have a piece of the pie.
Do you think the market hasn't developed quick enough for those guys? To satisfy the investors?
Yeah, yes, but I would also have a critical note. Sometimes I would say if I would be, I don't know, in that investor board, or had to judge the pitch, let's say like that. I always wonder. No, I think it should be more critical at some point, saying, okay, this is a good idea. There's market for it, but put it in the fridge. I think that should be the answer. I think it was so partly yes, the market hasn't developed quick enough then for those companies, but at the same time, a bit of realistic criticism would also be.
They've got their own the investors have got their own targets and debt to repay and things like that. So they might not be able to put it in the fridge and wait.
Yeah, yeah, and again, the third that that's because now again what you see definitely last, let's say, 6 months in the industry is that it backfires on the industry. At some point, a few companies will raise a lot of money, and you can have an opinion about that, but at least at some point they were the reference of the industry, and so it helped the industry getting a better PR, let's say, better publications. Now it backfires because now the same companies struggle, and then it gives a negative news about the energy. So that's why the industry needs new examples. But at the same time, sometimes say we can also blame ourselves. It's very easy to point like, yeah, the market is not growing fast enough, and this and this is a setback. And of course, it's in a new market, people tend to stand out, and it's very normal in a new industry that companies fail. That's very common in any industry, let's say, any new industry. At the same time, I dare to say that I think as an industry, again, I think an industry sometimes you should have been more critical in the start instead of only focusing on getting that money in and say it's a worry for later. No, it's in my view better to have the discussion in advance, and then to be successful. Then after 2 years not being successful, still have an argument with your investor, and in the end up with no job. So then all of your time and efforts are also lost.
So what does the industry need? If we're looking at the industry, not the individuals, what does it need to enable the individuals or businesses to prosper, in your view?
In general, for examples, successful examples. Because on the other hand, of course, the well-known companies in the industry were normally also not accessible. So it's not that you could give them a call and say, "Can I have a look?" Because or you get no answer, or the answer was no. But it's one of the two. And again, and it's not. I don't blame them. I understand from their perspective. Again, they were leading the industry, so it's partly is logic. But at the same time, if you keep having your doors closed, then you will never have people like you and me walking in and say, "Okay, why did you do this?" Or can't you do this? So to ask some questions, you get new views, new ideas. So but what today is you need also to talk to other suppliers and so on. Of course, you had a recent podcast with Friesen, for example. Also with them, of course, we have good communication. I also told them in the end, even I don't care which companies supply a successful project. Of course, I also want it to be my customers, but at the same time, I hate when a project of a competitor does it, it's not doing well because the industry, so also we need successful examples. And so my focus is having that. And of course, then the question is, how can you get successful examples? One other thing by communicating, by connecting people, seeing opportunities, seeing certain networks, because in general, people say there's always money available. There's always people. There are always people willing to invest in a certain new industry. But it's how realistically can you pitch, and how can you take away certain uncertainties?
So for new startups who are eager, enthusiastic in the industry, what do we have to encourage them to do other than what I imagine you would tell me, buy the insect school or insect engineers equipment?
Yeah, I don't know. I will, of course. In the end, that's my hope. And that's how I make. In the end, I make a living, of course. So yes, in the end, that's important. But it's I never worked from that mindset because it's I do believe in looking at simply what's the best solution. Because if I would think another solution is better, perhaps sometimes I would say, but in my mindset, I would say, okay, then I need to adjust my technology because apparently I'm not good enough at a certain point. I would always advise, okay, when you talk about promotion, I would say, okay, people have to follow 3-day training at the insect school, but that's often actually also reality because you can only really start a discussion when people have a certain knowledge. And this one remarkable thing about this industry is you get a lot of enthusiastic people who really wanted to enter this industry, but have no idea. So at least it's good to follow some kind of training to get at least the basics, the understanding of the basics, and you create a first network and you get to know people so you can later on also ask them questions. And aside of that, there's two main things. I think before you even start investing any money, besides you have two crates in your garden, okay, I don't care about that. Before you do really an investment, look carefully what's your raw materials and who's your customer. And it sounds very logic, and it is very logic, but it's surprisingly how many people in the past and probably in the future are not considering that as the first things
I,
because
I get that. I get that. I mean, everyone says, "Oh, black soldier flies will eat anything," so you disregard feedstock, and then the
it's
other
almost
attitude
all.
is, "Oh, once we've got the scale, then the black soldier flies will sell themselves because it's a sustainable savior to our world and the species." So why would you focus on marketing? Get the process right, and you don't need to focus on the inputs and outputs. It's a completely wrong way of looking at it.
Yeah, I would have said I've seen companies where they had I don't know they have then 10 people on R&D and 1 people on sales. I rather see the other way around. Or perhaps 10 people on sales is overkill. That's another story. But again, it's also there, then people suddenly get money, and we need to do R&D. So it's also very interesting. There's always something you can research, but at some point you say, okay, no. If we look at engineering of machinery, at some point, if I finish the machine today and next week I tell the engineer have another look, you'll find something new to do. So at some point, also in this case, also the farm is to say, okay, this is our knowledge and our technology for today. That's when we have ideas, write them down, but not focus on them unless they're absolutely critical, of course, but um, focus on getting your farm running, get your operations there, get a constant level of production. Because in the end, producing larvae and producing frogs, that's your main income. And it's still surprisingly how often the focus then was on R&D, but also let's say they want to develop a patent because that our investor wants that we have our own technology. But in the end, then you develop the patent, but we're not successful. So in the end, the patent is also no use. So I rather say focus on farming and getting your basics of agriculture, get your animal farm right. And by experience, you will go into new R&D, but then you also know better where to focus on. In the beginning, when you haven't run that farm yet, how can you properly judge then which R&D you should do? And often it's R&D on when you want to do something with chitin or something like that. All nice, but if you're really critical, is that a critical part in the start of your business? I would say no.
So get your hands dirty, get the farm right, and then do the R&D as
Yeah,
you go.
yeah.
Bob, that's a really good way to finish. We've run out of time. You've got in the background for anyone listening on audio, I'll read it out. Keep in touch with the Dutch. How do we keep in touch with you, Bob? For anyone who's interested.
Yeah, again, I would simply say, again, I'm active on LinkedIn, of course. At the same time, go to insectengineers.com and you can find more information. And of course, insectschool.com. So either way, we are open in sharing knowledge. We're happy to help people. We're happy to give honest advice. And again, I'm the Flying Dutchman, so I travel around the world. So often I can be somewhere close. So I'm also happy to visit people on site.
Brilliant. Bob, thank you very much for sharing all your insight and coming on the pod. You've been a brilliant guest and it's been great to learn from you.
Yeah, thank you, David, and see you next time.
Thank you very much.